Hi guys, welcome. Today is going to be a nice short little video about the shoe lineup that I used going into this marathon. So a shoe lineup is just your collection of shoes that you cycle through. You use different shoes for different reasons. Sometimes people just use one shoe throughout, but it's actually, from a gait analysis perspective, it's actually good to get into different types of shoes because your foot strikes the ground a little bit different in each shoe, and so you're actually training your muscles to fire in a little bit different pattern. Plus, there are advantages to some shoes that have carbon plates. I'm gonna go over my shoe lineup for this current marathon, and then gonna briefly talk about what the shoe lineup looks like going forward, because I'm gonna try some different stuff. Even though this shoe lineup worked pretty well for this marathon, there are just a couple things that I want to try. I always love kind of experimenting. I look at training as an experiment of n equals 1. Like, we can apply general principles to pretty much everyone, but then we need to address each person individually, and sometimes it might just be fun to try out a different pair of shoes. So I'm gonna start to do that a little bit more as we look into future training blocks, but for now I'm gonna go over the shoes that I used for this marathon training block. All right, so first up we have the Saucony Kinvaras. This is just like a tried and true shoe. So I have them in black, and I'm gonna pull up the other ones somewhere over here, maybe right here, on the screen that I have. I use these shoes for probably 80% of my training. And that kind of follows that same 80% principle of train easy 80% of the time, train hard 20% of the time, that polarized model. These are the shoes that I do most of my easy training in. So you're talking long runs, you're talking anything that's like a warm-up or a cool down, sometimes even some lighter tempo stuff. So if I start a workout and I have a couple miles or 10-15 minutes warm up, and then building into the workout maybe 2 miles of light tempo before I'll throw on any sort of spikes or any sort of like flats, I will wear these for that tempo, just so that I can go right into it. So they're a light enough shoe to be able to do that, and for most people you could probably get away with racing in this shoe. They don't have that big of a heel toe drop, and I'm going to talk more about heel toe drops and all that kind of stuff once I get into actual shoe reviews. But Saucony Kinvara is just a shoe that has stood the test of time. It's pretty soft, it's pretty light, so I do tend to buy multiple at a time. That way I can kind of cycle through them, and these are probably on their last legs. Moving on to the Skechers Speed Elite. I bought these shoes because I signed up for a road 5K back in October, and I wanted to have something that was more similar to a racing flat or training flat that I was used to. Kind of like the Saucony A5s, was just really minimalist, really lightweight, but has a little bit of that pop from a carbon fiber plate that is embedded into the sole. So I overall really like these shoes. I'd probably go half a size down, which is what I did on these shoes, because the upper isn't normally as snug as maybe an Adidas shoe is. But again, I'll go over that when I go into actual like shoe reviews. But for the most part, I really like these shoes. I've gotten a lot of use out of them. I use them for pretty much anything speed related. And in fact, I did my 10-mile tempo run in these shoes. So they're sturdy enough to withstand a big training block. I think I'll continue to use this shoe going into the next training block until it kind of falls apart on me, but I've used it a lot and it's still holding up really well. I use this for any sort of speed that I'm doing for the most part. If I was gonna get on the track and do some 400s, I might throw on the spikes, and I might do that later in the year, but for now, especially like treadmill speed sessions, these things are fantastic. Racing wise, I'd probably say half marathon or less. I'm not gonna go anything over a half marathon in these. In fact, I probably wouldn't run a half marathon in these, because moving on to the shoes that I'm gonna race in next week, which are the Adidas Adizero Adios Pros. That's a mouthful to say. I did a whole video on these shoes already. Obviously, these shoes have a lot of meaning to me, and these are going to continue to be my race shoes. I talked a little bit about in that other video how these shoes are a little different than some carbon fiber shoes just because they have the 5 metatarsal rods versus just a plate by itself. And you're starting to see more and more companies get into different configurations of those plates. It's kind of interesting because you can see how those metatarsal rods are kind of coming through on the bottom of the shoe. I just think that's interesting. I haven't even used these all that much. I've done just kind of a handful of workouts in these, and I'm gonna try to, because they're expensive, right? Like I'm gonna try to make them last as long as I can. They're starting to get a little bit worn out, and they're just an interesting shoe, right? There's no tread marks on the bottom of this shoe as compared to like this. This has got a Goodyear rubber sole on the bottom. There's nothing that's like tread like a normal shoe, but they're really grippy. It's what I raced Challenge Daytona in for the half Ironman that I did there, and set a run PB off the bike where I went 1:16:20. So they have a decent amount of pop, but especially for something like a half marathon, half Ironman and above, marathon especially, where your legs are gonna feel pretty beat up, hopefully at mile 20 or so, with the extra cushion of these shoes, I don't just absolutely feel like my legs are on fire. That is the shoe lineup, the 3 different shoes that I wore. Question of the day, I would love to know what your go-to training shoe is. What do you always go back to? Even if you go try something new, what is that shoe that you guys come back to? Love to know, let me know in the comments, and maybe I'll even give that one a test ride when I start to do those shoe reviews.